The Worst Girlfriend. In Capture Kill Release, the story follows an apparently normal couple, Jennifer and Farhang, but Jennifer reveals that she has an old and extremely disturbing desire. She wants to commit a crime and record everything as if it were a personal project. The difference in this movie starts right there. The ones filming aren't victims trying to survive. It's the people responsible for everything. Jennifer treats the idea like a creative plan, something she wants to carry out carefully, choosing details, the setting, and even the person involved. For her, this is almost a life goal. Farhang, on the other hand, gets into the situation in a very different way. At first, he thinks it's just talk, something that's not actually going to happen. But Jennifer insists, pressures, and manipulates him. Little by little, he gets pulled into it. When he realizes it, he's already too involved to just walk away. The most uncomfortable part is seeing how he knows it's wrong the whole time. He hesitates, questions it, tries to back out, but never manages to. The relationship turns into a trap. He keeps helping, participating, crossing lines he clearly didn't want to cross. And that's his worst fate. It's not just what happens, it's knowing he could have stopped and didn't. The broken mind. In the Poughkeepsie tapes, we get one of the most disturbing outcomes on this list. Everything is presented like a fake police documentary about a serial killer who terrorized a town for years. The police find an absurd collection of tapes recorded by the killer himself, documenting his acts and especially how he manipulated his victims. The movie has bizarre scenes like this. Among several cases, one stands out more. Cheryl Dempsey doesn't meet the same quick end as the other victims. She's kept alive for a long time. But that's not luck. It's part of something much worse. The kidnapper doesn't just want to cause pain. He wants total control. He isolates Cheryl, manipulates her, pressures her, and slowly breaks down her mind until she no longer reacts the way she used to. When she's finally rescued by the police, it seems like the nightmare is over. But that's not how it works. Cheryl can't go back to normal. She doesn't react like someone who escaped. She can't rebuild her life. And she even shows strange behavior, like part of her is still attached to the kidnapper. The heaviest part is realizing that even from afar, he still has control. Not physical, but mental. And that turns the idea of survival into something empty. In the end, she takes her own life 2 weeks after being rescued, leaving a love letter to the killer. To make it worse, the police kill the wrong man and never catch the real serial killer. A lot of people don't know this, but the movie stayed shelved for years after being finished because it was considered too disturbing, and even today it divides opinions because of that uncomfortable realism. The Forest Watches. In Willow Creek, we spend the entire movie waiting to see something, and when we understand what's happening, it's already too late. In the film, we follow Jim and Kelly, a couple traveling to a region famous for Bigfoot sightings. Jim is obsessed with the legend and wants to prove the creature exists. Kelly is more skeptical, but joins the trip more for the experience than belief. At first, everything feels light. They talk to locals, visit tourist spots, and head into the forest with that sense of adventure. But the movie slowly changes. Strange sounds start appearing. The feeling of isolation grows, and what seemed like fun turns uncomfortable. There's a specific scene that defines everything. They're inside a tent at night, hearing noises around them. You can't see anything, only hear it. This long scene inside the tent lasts several minutes without cuts, and the fear doesn't come from jump scares. It comes from tension. It feels like something is out there, circling, waiting for the right moment. When they finally try to leave the tent, everything spirals out of control. Jim ends up being attacked and disappears in the chaos. Kelly is left alone, lost, surrounded by something she can't even fully understand. Her fate is the heaviest part. The movie doesn't show everything directly, but it makes it clear she doesn't escape, or that she may have been taken to be violated by Bigfoot, the best friend. In Megan is Missing, the story revolves around two very different teenage girls. Megan is outgoing, always online, and loves attention. Amy is shy, more reserved, and clearly depends on her friend to fit in. When Megan starts talking to a guy online and decides to meet him in person, it seems like just another innocent meeting. But after that, she disappears without a trace. Amy panics and starts investigating on her own. She reviews conversations, old videos, and tries to understand what happened. The problem is that the closer she gets to the truth, the more she puts herself in danger, until the worst happens. Amy is also captured by the same person. From this point on, the movie completely shifts tone and becomes much heavier. Amy is kept trapped, isolated, and not knowing what will happen to her. At one point, the kidnapper offers a false chance at freedom. He says she can leave, but first she has to get inside a barrel. With no options, she agrees. But when it opens, she realizes something terrible. Megan's body is inside in that same tight space. The final outcome is suffocating. The barrel is closed and buried, leaving Amy trapped in the dark with no way out next to the best friend she tried to save. The director deliberately built the movie as if it were a compilation of real files, which made a lot of people believe it could have actually happened. The endless cycle. In the Dyatlov Pass incident, we follow a group of students who decide to investigate a real case, the disappearance of 9 hikers in Russia in 1959. The idea is simple: record a documentary and try to understand what really happened in that isolated place full of theories. At first, everything goes like a normal expedition: conversations, planning, walking through the snow. But as they move forward, signs start appearing that something is wrong. Strange footprints, equipment failing, and a constant feeling that they're not alone. Things spiral out of control when they find an abandoned facility in the middle of the mountain. The place seems to have been used for experiments, and that's where everything completely falls apart. Deformed creatures start surrounding the group. Some die in the chaos, but 2 manage to survive longer and find some kind of passage inside the bunker. With no options, they go through it. That's when the reveal hits. They didn't escape. They went back in time to 1959 at the exact moment the original group was being attacked. And worse, the process physically transforms them. They become exactly the creatures that were attacking the group before. In other words, they cause their own fate. The movie mixes fiction with a real case that still generates theories today, which makes this twist even more unsettling for those who know the original story. The game continues. In Creep 2, we follow Sarah, a videographer who creates content about lonely and strange people. She agrees to meet a guy who introduces himself as Aaron, immediately saying he's a serial killer. But he says it so casually that it sounds like a joke, and that's the most dangerous detail.
I am what is commonly known as a serial killer.
This Aaron is actually the same Joseph from the first movie who killed the protagonist, now even more comfortable with who he is. Unlike the first story here, he doesn't try to hide much. He plays with the truth the whole time, mixing honesty with performance, leaving Sarah confused about what's real and what isn't. The strangest part is that Sarah plays along. Instead of running, she gets closer. The dynamic between them becomes almost intimate, like a real connection. They talk, laugh, share strange moments, and for a while it feels like she has some control. But that's exactly what he wants. At a certain point, everything flips. Sarah realizes she's gone too far, but it's already too late. She's attacked and put into a situation where she could easily meet the same fate as the other victims. Somehow she survives. But the movie doesn't treat that as a victory. In the final scene, Sarah is on public transportation when she notices someone watching her, a familiar whistle. The camera suggests he's still there, or worse, that she never fully escaped his influence. The movie leans much more into psychological discomfort than direct horror. The infected water. You go into the water thinking it's just another normal day and come out completely doomed. In the Bay, everything starts in a small coastal town during 4th of July celebrations. But little by little, something starts going wrong. The story takes place in Claridge during a regular holiday with a calm atmosphere and people enjoying the water. But behind that, something is already out of control. Slowly, people begin showing strange symptoms: irritation, confusion, erratic behavior. At first, everything is treated as isolated cases: accidents, food poisoning, even animal attacks. But as the records progress, it becomes clear there's a pattern. Something is contaminating the town's water. The truth is much worse. Isopods, small parasites, mutated after exposure to chemical waste and began infecting humans, developing inside their bodies. And no one realizes it in time. When things explode, too many people are already affected. The government steps in, eliminates the problem with chemicals, and shuts everything down quickly. But the official version never mentions what really happened. To the public, it was just a change in water temperature. That's where Donna comes in, the reporter who followed everything closely. In the end, she reveals that she was responsible for leaking the information, and that's the problem. Now that she exposed everything, she becomes a target. There's no anonymity anymore, no safety. Her fate is to live constantly on alert, knowing she messed with something way bigger than she should have. The movie uses multiple perspectives to create that sense of reality, like a massive dossier being reconstructed piece by piece. The Cursed Hotel. In Followed, the story follows Mike, a digital influencer completely obsessed with growing online. With his channel Drop the Mic, he lives off controversy, challenges, and anything that gets clicks. When the opportunity comes up to explore a hotel famous for strange events, he doesn't think twice. Money, subscribers, and fame, that's all he wants. The place in question is the Lenox Hotel, clearly inspired by real stories of a hotel in the United States, known for bizarre happenings. Mike decides to spend 3 nights there with his team, streaming everything as exclusive content. At first, he treats everything like entertainment. He jokes around, exaggerates reactions, and clearly doesn't take anything seriously. But the environment starts to change. Strange things begin happening little by little. Sounds, quick apparitions, situations even he can't really explain. Even so, so, Mike insists on continuing, because every weird moment brings more views, and that's the problem. He doesn't realize he's no longer in control. The hotel seems to act quietly, manipulating his behavior. Little by little, Mike changes. He becomes more aggressive, more disconnected, clearly affected by something he doesn't understand. By the time the movie reaches the end, he's no longer the same guy. And the worst fate isn't dying, it's staying there. The final impression is that Mike became part of the hotel itself, trapped in that cycle, attracting other people just like he used to. The movie works almost like a direct critique of influencer culture, showing how far someone can go for attention, even when they clearly should stop. The Silent Possession. In The Taking of Deborah Logan, the story follows a film crew that decides to document the daily life of Deborah Logan, an elderly woman suffering from Alzheimer's. The idea is to show how the disease affects the person and those around them. At first, everything seems within expectations. Forgetfulness, mood swings, confusing moments. But little by little, some behaviors start going completely off pattern. Deborah begins acting strangely, saying disconnected things, and showing behaviors that don't match just Alzheimer's. The crew keeps filming, unsure whether they're dealing with an extreme case of the disease or something else. As they dig deeper, they discover an old story involving a doctor named Henri Desjardins, who had a very specific goal tied to immortality. From that point on, the movie makes it clear that what's happening to Deborah isn't just a disease. She's being possessed by his spirit. The problem is that while they try to understand it, things only get worse. Deborah completely loses control, putting other people at risk and becoming the center of something much bigger than anyone expected. At the climax, Deborah is already completely taken over by the spirit of Henri Desjardins. She kidnaps Cara, a young cancer patient, because she needs to complete the final step of the ritual, the final sacrifice. When Sarah, Deborah's daughter, and the crew arrive, they find her in a completely abnormal state, trying to carry out the ritual in a direct and disturbing way. Sarah intervenes, manages to stop the process, and destroys Desjardins' remains, which should theoretically end the possession. For a moment, it seems like it worked. Deborah returns to normal, but completely broken. But the movie saves the final blow. Months later, Cara appears cured of cancer. Everything seems positive until she looks at the camera, and that's when it becomes clear the ritual worked.
It's a happy ending.
The Living Church. In the Borderlands, you think they're exploring an old place, until you realize the place is alive. The story follows 3 men sent by the Vatican to investigate strange events in an isolated church in rural England. The group is made up of Father Mark, more skeptical, Brother Deacon, more sensitive to faith, and Gray, the tech guy who records everything. At first it seems like just another strange religious case, but things quickly become uncomfortable. A local priest takes his own life without explanation.
But if this isn't a miracle... Get out of here! Father Craddock... Oh, Christ!
Residents act strangely, and there are bizarre reports involving animals. Nothing really fits, and that creates constant tension. Even so, they continue the investigation. Things escalate when they decide to explore beneath the church. They discover it was built on top of an ancient pagan temple. In other words, there's something there much older than any Christian belief. They enter tight tunnels, crawling, barely able to move. At first, it just feels claustrophobic, until it doesn't. The revelation comes brutally. Those tunnels aren't tunnels. They're inside something, a gigantic organism, which means the walls aren't stone, they're flesh, and there's no way out. Deacon and Gray panic when they realize they're being digested alive with no chance of escape. There's no fight, no rescue. The director intentionally holds this reveal until the final minutes to deliver that sudden shock that completely changes how you see the movie. The Crazy Fan. In Be My Cat, a film for Anne, everything revolves around Adrian, an aspiring filmmaker who has one very specific goal: to convince actress Anne Hathaway to star in his movie. But he doesn't want to do it the traditional way. His idea is to record a test, showing how committed he is to the project, and that's where things start to spiral out of control. Adrian begins recruiting local young actresses to take part in these recordings. At first, it just seems like a weird, slightly uncomfortable project, but still within acceptable limits. But little by little, it becomes clear that he's crossing lines. He constantly mixes reality with fiction, treating everything as part of the movie, while the people around him start to realize that something is very wrong. He then starts torturing and killing the actresses, and the most disturbing part is how he sees himself. Adrian truly believes that everything he's doing makes sense, that it's necessary to prove his talent and get Anne Hathaway's attention. This isn't an impulsive plan. It's something calculated, cold, and completely twisted. In the end, Adrian meets the actress Alexandra, but before killing her, she convinces him to actually go meet Anne Hathaway.
And go to Anne and tell her.
He thinks it's a good idea, spares her life, and travels to Hollywood to meet the actress in person, still believing that everything he did made sense. So Alexandra survives, but she'll have to spend the rest of her life knowing about the crimes, and still dealing with the fact that she encouraged a psychopath to go after the actress, the Rat Man. In VHS 94, the segment Storm Drain throws us straight into the investigation of reporter Holly Marciano and cameraman Jeff. The two go down into a sewer system trying to find an urban legend known as Ratman. The idea is to capture something bizarre and gain attention, but what they find down there changes their lives forever. Right at the beginning, they run into homeless people living in that place. One of them immediately stands out, covered in a strange black substance. When they try to interview him, he reacts in an incomprehensible way, repeating a single word, Ratma. The atmosphere instantly gets heavy. Holly and Jeff try to leave, but end up surrounded and captured by a group that believes they're following some kind of new entity. That's when everything falls apart. The creature appears. A grotesque being, part human, part rat, that doesn't need to do much to show it's in control. Jeff gets hit by a dark substance and doesn't survive. The worst comes after. Holly reappears at the TV station, seemingly normal, presenting a live report. But something is off. In the middle of the broadcast, she loses control and attacks her co-anchor with the same substance. Before it cuts out, she sends a direct message.
Hail Radma.
On the screen is a video where we show some horror movies you won't believe actually exist. Click and watch. See you there!